So just go and do it, try, learn from it. You'll fail at some things. That's a learning experience that you need so that you can take that on to the next experience. And don't let people who you may respect and who you believe know what they're talking about, don't let them tell you it can't be done. Because often they will tell you it can't be done, and it's just because they don't have the courage to try it.
Ben Graham in his low teens looked around and he looked at the people he admired and he said, you know, I want to be admired, so why don't I just behave like them? And he found there was nothing impossible about behaving like them. And similarly, he did the same thing on the reverse side in terms of getting rid of those qualities.
Baby steps count too, as long as you're going forward. And one day you add all those baby steps up and you might be surprised at where you can get to. But more importantly, I remember something my mom used to say to me every day. She would say, son, the cavalry ain't coming. You got to do this yourself. Ain't no backup. Okay? And when you put those two things together, man, it wasn't as hard to keep going forward as you might think.
So to really take a longer-term view, not just, to look 3 months from now, but look 3 years from now, and where the future's going to come, whether you like it or not. So you want to kind of be one step ahead.
It's a mind game, then?
Well, I think it's psychology. And everything, again, most of life comes down to psychology, doesn't it? It starts here, in the internal world. Before you can master the external world, you have to master your own internal world. That's the true secret to success.
People that look for great ideas to make money, aren't nearly as successful as those who say, okay, what do I really love to do? What am I excited about? What do I know something about? What's kind of interesting and compelling.
It's very rewarding when you work on something you think is going to make a big difference. And yeah, it's a little bit harder, but I think the passion that one might bring with it brings so much more energy to that you're more likely to succeed.
You need to care about everything, and it starts with yourself. Look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, what do I want to do every day for the rest of my life? Do that. I promise you can monetize that shit. If you love Alf, do an Alf blog. You collect Smurfs, Smurf it up. Whatever you need to do it. So many people are talking about, I can't monetize. There's a billion 70-year-old douchebags that are in control right now. But the number 2 person, that 34-year-old lady, she's gonna buy your shit. She's gonna put the advertising on your stuff. It's coming. Stop crying and just keep hustling.
I had no idea. I grew up in Pittsburgh. My dad did upholstery on cars, so if you got a rip in your car seat, you took it to him. My mom had odd jobs from selling real estate to making baskets, and I was just a normal kid, but I was always into business. From as long as I could remember, I was selling something or working on something, trying to make money, and it just got me excited to be a business person, and it just took off from there.
We all need a mission. That's what life should be, is a mission. That's what gives your life purpose and focus and drive and ultimately satisfaction. Now, that mission can be the job you work at. It can be providing for your family, or it can be getting better at jiu-jitsu, or stronger at Olympic lifting, or starting a business that you want to grow and build and take over the world. And sometimes people ask me what to do if they don't know what their mission is or what their mission should be. And I tell them, if they're in that situation, to go help someone. Go help someone else. Make that your mission. Because that will make you better, and it'll make the world better. And eventually from that, you'll see what your mission is.
From the time I was 7 years old, every Saturday I would go for 4 hours of acting class every Saturday.
Whoa.
And I loved it. I just loved it. To the point where all the kids graduated and went on to this other stuff, and I started doing adult acting classes, and then I was in the commercial classes, and then I loved like the hair and makeup classes and just everything. I just couldn't get enough.
As soon as I got off the phone call with him, and then also when he said, it's not in the picture now, but I think it'd be great if Dallas danced at the end, and my heartbeat went up on the phone, and I started breaking a cold sweat, like going, no, that's not. And as soon as I went, oh no, that's not that. The other devil in my ear said, dare you, dude. And I just went, of course. I think, yes. Because I immediately noticed, if you don't, you're wussing out, dude. Are you kidding me? You will forever regret. You have to. So as soon as I got over that, I was like, well, that's inevitable. I'm doing it. Now, I got to bust my ass to go do it the best I can. And a lot of fear in that. I mean, that was, yeah, that was some majorly good anxiety and fear. And then, now I'm saying by that time, now everything, my choices from that phone call on were, anything I was nervous about, you have to go, F it. No, dude, go. All the way, go, meet midnight. Yes, can y'all meet me for another choreograph session? 8 a.m. Sunday morning, do you got an hour? I'm gonna go stand in the mirror. My wife's over there watching, reading something. I'm gonna stand in the mirror and I'm gonna practice a move. This is really embarrassing. Well, too bad, man. Do it in the mirror right now, because the less embarrassing that gets, hopefully the more comfortable you'll be when you're out there in front of 80 people and a bunch of cameras. And one thing you do when you go out there, don't come up short. Go all the way.
Well, for me, I mean, yeah, you visualize where you want to be and what you want to accomplish, and you kind of get lost in the process of day-to-day, you know, grinding it out and working, pulling on ours if you have to. You know, it's just about not losing vision and not losing sight of what you're trying to accomplish, no matter what hurdles you have to go through. So I think that kind of relates to whatever you're doing, whatever you know, major you've chosen or what you're interested in. So for me in basketball, and it's about, you know, visualizing, whether you write it down, put it on the wall, do something, what your goals are, and get lost in the process of day-to-day grind, day-to-day getting better every single day. Asking questions, aligning yourself with people that have been through it before, that are experienced, and leaning on that advice, and just trying to outwork the next person, and that's the biggest thing.
I try and be decisive. I try and, even if I don't know what the hell I'm doing, I try to be decisive, because I think it's very comforting and reassuring and important to the people that are working with you to feel that whoever is in charge knows what they're doing and knows what they're thinking, and that if it's a yes, it's a yes, and it's a no, it's a no. I mean, I don't think of myself as a boss. I mean, I think of myself as someone who's giving direction and guidance, and vice versa.
Compassion for yourself, of course, is as important as compassion for others. When you, often I get asked questions like people who did something that they now realize was deeply wrong in the past. Sometimes people ask questions about they brought up their children in a way that they now realize was not very conscious, and so that they may have caused suffering to their children, or other people find they have caused suffering to loved ones, and they now realize that what they did was wrong. And again, I say this is an example where you need to be compassionate with yourself, because no human being can act beyond their level of consciousness. So that was your level of consciousness at the time, and you could not go beyond that. And again here, to make demands upon yourself, up to a point it might be a good thing to if you, as long as you enjoy it, it's a wonderful thing. When the enjoyment of what you're doing is lost, then you have to be careful, because there you have to come to a stop and say, okay, there's something here that's not right, because I'm no longer enjoying what I'm doing.
I've learned and experienced is that, you know, if you don't open up and you don't delegate, then you'll kill yourself. And if there's one thing that I've managed to understand is the art of delegation, because if I can pass on, you know, to Claire Smith, to Arian, my palette, my understanding, my knowledge, then grab it, run it, and then pass it on to your team. Don't hold that inside.
I was with a bunch of other investors who I respect, and they brought me a deal, and I wanted to be part of it, but it didn't feel right. And I wrote millions of dollars on that one. And it just didn't feel right, and I lost it all within 2 years.
So should investors trust their gut then?
Absolutely, and trust your gut.
But what about, you said earlier, don't be emotional, and sometimes the gut is
emotional. No, this is a barometer of risk. It's something internalized for an investor that says, I don't feel comfortable. It's not about emotion, it's just don't write that check. That was recently the first time I didn't listen to that, and I lost everything. So now my radar is up. I listen to my gut. It's not an emotion, it's an index of risk. And you get it as you age. You become a better investor every year. If only I could live to 200, I'd be really good.
Many kids and many grown-ups do figure out over time what their passions are. And sometimes we let I don't think it's that hard. I think what happens though sometimes is that we let our intellectual selves overrule those passions. And so that's what needs to be guarded against.
You already know who you are. And that peace that we're after lies somewhere beyond personality. Your need for acceptance can make you invisible in this world. Don't let anything stand in the way of the light that shines through this form. Risk being seen in all of your glory.
I don't pay no attention to what they say about me. All I do is just do what I have to do and get paid, and that's it. But I don't really pay no attention to the rules of boxing. I don't pay no attention. I defy all the rules. I've added pages to the book of boxing.
The world is a hurting place, and the world needs hope, and the world needs love. Without hope, we feel like, why are we here? Well, brokenness. Here's mine. Today, I still have no arms, no legs, but everything's changed. Everything. For me, I was looking for hope and happiness, and I couldn't see it for many years. In fact, if this side of the table represents my hope, truth encourages me to become all that I can be. But then we have lies every day coming in our mind, people who discourage us. You know the people that you have in your life who, no matter how good of a day you're having, they'll bring you down. Or no matter how bad of a day you're having, they'll bring you even lower. You know what I'm talking about? Think of the 3 biggest discouragers in your life. They're not your biggest discouragers. You are. You are. It only takes 3 seconds for me to tell you something discouraging, but then you may never forget my words.
A lot of times I'll be in a 200-mile run or something like that, and I'm all jacked up. Body's broken, mind's broken, spirit's broken. I start to say, what if I can pull this off? When I first walked into the Navy SEAL recruiter's office, he looked at me and said, there's only been 35 African Americans in 70 years make it through. You know what I said to myself? What if I can be the 36th? It's the what if I can pull off a miracle. What if I can become someone that no one thinks I can be? And just me talking about that, I have the hair going up on my arms because it makes me just like, what if I can be that guy that people who call nigger and this and that, and now I'm speaking at Tom Ferry's event.
First of all, you have to treat yourself like you matter, because if you don't, then you don't take care of yourself and you become vengeful and cruel. And you take it out on people around you, and you're not a positive force. None of that's good. So you suffer more, and so does everyone around you. And there's a malevolence that enters into it. None of that's good. So that's what happens if you don't treat yourself like you matter. And then, well, what happens if you don't treat other people like they matter? Well, you lie to them, you cheat them, you steal, you enter into impulsive relationships with them. They can't trust you. That doesn't go anywhere. They don't like you. You end up alone at best, and maybe like incarcerated at worst. Like that doesn't work. And so you watch the people around you who thrive, regardless of what they say. They act out the proposition that everyone matters. And then you have a functional society. And I think, okay, well, if when you act out the proposition that everyone matters, you have a functional society, maybe that's evidence that that proposition is true. It's like, I think it's true.
It's so hard. I thought doing this research, I thought going into it, there were authentic people and inauthentic people. I had I did not find any evidence of that at all. What I found is authenticity is a practice, and you choose it every day, sometimes every hour of every day. And it's a practice. It's not, I just wake up and, hey, I'm authentic.
You have to have an emotional investment in what you're doing. If you don't love what you're doing, failure is pretty much guaranteed. Success is not guaranteed by any means, but failure is much more likely if you don't love what you're doing.
You know, one of the things that I do is I question a lot of things. And you can do that in a good way and a bad way, but hopefully if you try to get people to motivate why they're doing something and their way of thinking, you know, the worst thing you can end up with is a situation where you get told, well, this is the way it's always been. Mm-hmm. That's the worst ever. That's a non-answer. Instead, ask yourself, you know, given everything we have today, is there a way we can make this better?
When it comes to changing the world, what I learned from Steve Jobs is, if you believe in a Macintosh, if you believe in iPhone, iPod, iPad, if you believe enough, then you will see it. Because other people will believe in it. Other people will create software. Other people will create products. So you need to foster the belief in what you are dreaming so that it becomes a reality, which is very different than saying, I don't expect anybody to believe it until I see it. You need people to believe it before they can see it.
And so when we're coming up with ideas, you know, we always ask ourselves, what kind of new market is this creating? And then also, what part of my day and what problem is it solving? And so I've gone as far as taking an entire catalog of my day from the moment I open my eyes and writing down every single thing I do. And then asking myself, is there something here?
Don't necessarily think that you have to have the home run and the huge Apple computer on your first start. I spent a long time in my life with skills just building little devices for fun. For fun is one of the key things, because that drives you to think and think and think and make it better and better and better than you ever would if you're doing it for a company. Build things at first for yourself that you would want.
If you're not coming up with 10 ideas a day, that's why I have this thing. If I'm not filling up this page every single day, then my idea muscle will atrophy. And I started this in 2001, and I still do it every single day. You have to come up with ideas every single day, or the idea muscle atrophies. The good news is, after about 6 months of doing that, you're like a machine. People get surprised at how many ideas you could just have
But what you really need to do is think about what is the smallest possible test that I can run for this idea, for this concept, for this theory, get it out there, and get customers using it. Because your customers are going to be the ones to tell you if it's really working or not.
If you're not utilizing an online community, then you're at a disadvantage to those who are. You can be asking online communities what they think about your ideas, or if they have any advice with what you're working on. Not only will you hear from people who are passionate about the subject, but you'll be hearing from people all around the world, each with their own experiences and stories that can help you.
Once you have the passion and thing that you're passionate about now, you can look at other people or other entities or other things or works of art, and you can draw things from that to help you be better at what you do by looking for those common denominators. Johnny wanted to know, how do I prepare? How do I prepare? How do I study? How do I view the game? How do you build your game? And my response is much like the way he builds products. You think sequentially. You look at the end result of what you want to create, but in order to create that, there's so many other little things that go into this massive entity or device. It's no different than building my basketball game. You start with, what do you want your game to be? What would make your game most unstoppable or hard to deal with? And now you work backwards from there. And you start building it one piece at a time, one move at a time, one counter at a time. So there's a lot of similarities there.
You want an idea about which you can say, I know it sounds like a bad idea, but here's specifically why it's actually a great one. You want to sound crazy, but you want to actually be right.
Because when you're trying to differentiate, when you're trying to do something different, there's going to be that gut moment, that gut sense. Is this right? Is this not right? If you're not having doubt, you're not pushing the boundaries far enough.
One of the things I advise entrepreneurs to do is when you have an idea, so a classic entrepreneurial impulse is to hold the idea close to you and not go tell people because, oh, the idea is so special.
Right.
That's almost always a mistake. Go talk to
Why is that a mistake?
It's a mistake because your actual real competitive advantage is not that you have this idea that you have locked away in your closet, which may or may not be accurate and you have no idea which it is. Your actual competitive advantage is if you're assembling the intelligence around, does this idea work? What is the right teams? What is the right learnings? And we're essentially in motion.
Like me, have to do everything 3 times before we get it right. Thankfully, I know that. So I know that I have to get up early and try it 5 times because the 8-year-old will be able to get past it in 2 times. So I have to be on my feet longer, but at least I know it. And so I just go at stuff. And it served me very well, in that my resume is pretty varied, and I have a pretty interesting life. You know, I get to do different stuff and have a bit of access, because I just said, yeah, I'll try that. I mean, why would I hold back?
I think success, first of all, is knowing my purpose in life. As I have watched and observed successful people, what I have discovered about them is they really have figured out why they're here. They really do have their act together. And knowing their purpose in life is a stability for them. So that when everyone else is rocking and rolling and things are a little unsteady and people are kind of leaving the ship and people are kind of abandoning their causes, these people, they hold steady right throughout the storm because they have a true North Star. They truly are focused. It becomes an anchor in their life that just holds them steady. And the anchor is a confidence based upon a knowledge of purpose.
There were other things that I probably should have done, not from my perspective. I mean, from my point of view, I did the right things. Every film that I've done, I'm happy that I made that choice. I don't have any regrets whatsoever. But I mean, in terms of sustaining box office, bankability, I should have done a few other things that I didn't do, but I'm glad I didn't do them, me.
Because it wouldn't have been you?
Yeah, it would have been for the wrong reasons. Everything that I've been lucky enough to do, I did for the right reasons.
Don't think about how do I get big fast. That will happen if you actually build something super meaningful and super important. So don't think about, what is the quickest way to success? Think about what is the best way to building something important that the world really needs.
So when we see a kid with a lemonade stand, it's different than when we see a vending machine selling lemonade, even if it's exactly the same product, because the story around it is what people are paying for. So when I meet small business people, all I ask them is not what's their balance sheet, but what's their story. Why should I pick you? Why do I care about what you're doing? And if you start giving me all this inside baseball statistics about why you're 2% better than some other competitor, I'm already glazed over, because that's not part of the way I see the world.
Like, you don't have to be the best, but you have to be dangerous, right? You have to learn just enough to be dangerous to build an idea, concept it, and show it to the world. And then it turns out there are lots of other people, including all 170 employees that work at Instagram, who are much better at doing all that stuff than I am. But you need to find people who can, be drawn to the idea that you build, and then they end up taking it and making it even better.
That I have to want this to exist in the world. I have to not. So it's a similar rule. Just say, if this was successful and I had nothing and I was not involved and I got no money off it or would I want it to do well? And that's a great check, I think, to know if you really feel good about the idea and can be passionate about it.
This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist?
I say to my girls all of the time that your real work is to figure out where your power base is and to work on the alignment of your personality your gifts that you have to give with the real reason why you're here. That's the number one thing you have to do, is to work on yourself and to fill yourself up and keep your cup full. Keep yourself full. Now, I used to be afraid of that. I used to be afraid, particularly from people who say, oh, she's so full of herself. She's so full of herself. And now I embrace it. I consider it a compliment that I am full of myself. Because you only when you're full, I'm full, I'm overflowing, my cup runneth over. I have so much to offer and so much to give. And I am not afraid of honoring myself, you know? It's miraculous when you think about it.
And there are a lot of people from whom we can learn a lot. And I think, like, you know, the one piece of advice is, like, don't underestimate anyone you come across, ever. Right. Like, whether they're, a blue-collar worker waiting for the bus, or they're, helping you they're the server or bartender at the restaurant, or they're a lower-ranking employee. I mean, the smartest leaders I've ever seen have always gone around the room and asked for everybody's opinion.
The hardest thing to do is start. You have all these ideas, and everyone has an idea, but it's really about executing the idea and building the idea and attracting other people to help you work on the idea. That is the biggest challenge. But the way to begin is to get the idea out of your head, draw it out, talk about it, program it if you're a programmer, or make it if you're building something.
I think great entrepreneurs must have the curiosity to kind of metaphorically see around the corner. What's coming? What can I anticipate that other people don't see? And then you must have the courage of your convictions to execute the strategy.
One way to conceptualize what makes a good product is, good engineering is part of it, good design is part of it, but really it's, one way I think about it is, maximizing the probability that someone shows up at the front door of, your store or your website or whatever it is and ends up with a solved problem.
And oftentimes the best methodology is to start with the perfect experience with just one person, get that right, and then figure out how to scale something great, instead of scaling something not so great and then trying to improve it. That's really hard to do.
Has acting turned out to be all that you wanted it to be?
It's incredible. It's incredible. I never knew that I could do it as a career. I never knew. It was the first memory that I had. It's the first thing I can think of is saying, I want to be an actor, to my parents. And if I hadn't lived in Los Angeles and been in such close proximity to sort of the mecca of movie making, if I didn't have parents that said, okay, we'll drive you to auditions, we didn't have the economic means to, move camp from Idaho to Los Angeles because some snotty 10-year-old kid says, I want to be an actor. We did it. After school, I got to go on auditions, but it was always, and I've said this before, it felt like an elite group of people, and it felt like I would never belong to them. So once I got the opportunity to, for example, get the movie This Boy's Life with Robert De Niro, I said, wow, now I'm able to I might be able to steer the course of my career. I might be able to have a career similar to these guys that I so admire. And that I knew at 15 years old was the biggest gift in the world, and that's never left me. I've never that thirst or that hunger for wanting to give one great performance that I'm truly satisfied with, or be in one movie that I said, I love this film, is something that I don't know will ever be quenched. I don't know, and I think that's a good thing, because it keeps pushing you. You're constantly dissatisfied, in other words.
And so I think when you are starting a new business, you don't want to go after giant markets. You want to go after small markets, and you want to take over those markets quickly.
Go talk to people who failed at what you're doing, and who are no longer doing it. There always are those people. So you start a startup, you look at the history of your space. I'm so surprised how many people I talk to, founders who have no idea the history of their own space. And there's some nice naivete to that, in the sense that, like, you're going to do it differently, and there's some truth to that. But, like, when you get down to making it work, and now you're into it already, you've kind of established what you're doing, you have some problems, then I'd go talk to all these people who failed, because you'll uncover all sorts of interesting things that you could try.
You know, I looked at lots of companies and why I thought they don't succeed over time. We've had a more rapid turnover of companies. And I said, what did they fundamentally do wrong? Like, what do those companies all do wrong? And usually it's just they miss the future. And so I think, for me, I just tried to focus on that and say, what is that future really going to be, and how do we create it?
I do believe that organizations, human organizations, are inherently unstable. They will fall over, and you have to work to keep them upright. But they fall slowly. Most people don't notice it. They let their success blind them. They don't see it falling over. The falling takes place slow, but the collapse is quick. You have to do constant assessment. You have to look for the hard truths.
That whatever you do, somebody can do it better. You have to bring your A game in every single day. There's nothing unique about any one individual. What's unique is their passion, their ability to execute, to meet targets and exceed them. The minute you lose that ability, in capitalism, you're gone. It's a fair trade. The engine that makes you rich can take it all away from you. There are no guarantees. I think that's incredibly important.
There's a lot of conventional wisdom out there, built up over time and built through all the learnings from all the companies. And this may be fully applicable to most of the companies out there. But before it's applied to your organization, I highly recommend that you question it, because it could be absolutely fatal for your success.
How do you think about making a decision when everyone tells you this is a crazy idea? Or where do you get the internal strength to do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say I actually think I feel fear quite strongly. So it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of the fear.
So speaking of important things,
like people shouldn't think people shouldn't think, well, I feel fear about this and therefore I shouldn't do it. It's normal to feel fear. Like there'd have to be something mentally wrong if you didn't feel fear.
So you just feel it and let the importance of it drive you to do it anyway.
Yeah, actually something that can be helpful is fatalism, to some degree. If you just accept the probabilities, then that diminishes fear. When starting SpaceX, I thought the odds of success were less than 10%, and I just accepted that actually probably I would just lose everything. But that maybe would make some progress. If we could just move the ball forward, even if we died, maybe some other company could pick up the baton and keep moving it forward, so that would still do some good. Yeah, same with Tesla. I thought the odds of a car company succeeding were extremely low.
Most startups that fail do it ultimately because they did not make something that people wanted. They made something that, that they thought people would want, but they were either in denial about it, whether it was actually any good, or somebody else came along and made something that people wanted even more.
And so it's not just about doing focus groups, it's not just about double checking your vision, it really is about integrating this concept of testing our ideas rigorously throughout the product development process, throughout the marketing process, even as we scale up.
What this all comes down to is doing something exceptional for your users, whether it's in community, whether it's in connection, or whether it's in design. This is our big advantage as a startup, is that we can actually get away with doing this. We can make this the core part of why we're doing business.
To come through on your word, it allows the guys that you're leading, male or female, to be able to say, okay, we can follow this person because he won't let us down. For me, as the leader of our franchise and the leader of my household and the leader of so many, different things, I think it's the confidence, but it's also you practicing what you preach. I'm not a guy who just talks about it. I actually go out and do it as well, from a basketball perspective or from a leadership perspective with my kids and my foundation. You know, we have a promise initiative where they promise me that they will go to school, they will listen to their teachers, they'll be great to their classmates, and I promise them that I will continue to be a great role model, a father figure for them, and not let those guys down. So I take that responsibility, and I don't just talk about it, I actually do it as well. So when you're able to come through on your word, it allows the guys that you're leading, male or female, to be able to say, okay, we can follow this person because he won't let us down. No matter if it's going good or bad. You know, every day is not a bed of roses. We understand that, and you have to be able to handle adversity as well.
I do think that one thing that's important is, especially if you're a founder or a technical founder, is to realize that you can't do everything, and even if you can, you shouldn't.
I think you should be spending your money on teaching and sharing, and so that might mean hiring a writer or two, perhaps, instead of a marketing person. You know, and start writing and start getting people to listen to what you're saying. You can't talk about yourself all the time because no one's going to come back for that. But you have to talk about things that are relevant to your industry or ideas that you have, and start to build that audience up.
Try to do something that you would want to do anyway, whether it's it doesn't necessarily have to be a very successful business, because when you do decide to become an entrepreneur and start a business, chances are it's not going to become like a multi-million-dollar business. So at least do something that you love in the beginning, so that even if it fails, you'd still enjoy it.
Another quality that I think is important is kind of being flexible-minded or open-minded. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a vision for your idea or your product, but you need to be open to changes.
You should find a great partner no matter what it is that you're doing. And you should look for someone who is very high intelligence, very high energy, and very high integrity. And you need all three of those, and you can't compromise on any one of them. Otherwise, you'll end up with either someone who's not smart, which does you no good, or someone who's not hardworking, which also does you no good, or the worst case is you end up with a smart, hardworking crook who ends up working against your interests. And integrity is something that takes a lot of time spent with someone to figure out.
We know from our past experiences that big things start small. The biggest oak starts from an acorn, and you've got to recognize, if you want to do anything new, you've got to be willing to let that acorn grow into a little sapling and then finally into a small tree, and maybe one day it'll be a big business on its own.
And in fact, that's one of the mottos for one of your initiatives, and forgive my pronunciation of the Latin, but Gradatim ferociter. What does that mean to you? Well,
It means step by step ferociously. And it's the motto for Blue Origin. Basically, you can't skip steps. You have to put one foot in front of the other. Things take time. There are no shortcuts. But you want to do those steps with, passion and ferocity.
There are a lot of things that are outside of your control. A lot of external circumstances will determine the success of your idea, whether the market timing's right for this new kind of service, or whether people, whether a customer, like the economy's right for your kind of service, right? Whether you meet the right people who will finance your company. Many external circumstances are outside of your control but will affect the outcome, and you have to be okay with that.
It looks like you always go out of your comfort zone, right? Coming onto an island that was completely deserted, no fresh water, you didn't even have the money to buy it, and now you're sleeping on a tent on the beach trying to figure out how to get fresh water here. You do that often. You did it with the airline.
I was just somebody that experienced the bad experience of traveling on airlines. I was actually trying to get to the BVI, the British Virgin Islands, one day from Puerto Rico, and the same lovely lady was waiting for me, and I'd been away for 3 weeks, and American Airlines bumped the flight, and so I went to the back of the airport. I hired a plane, I hired a blackboard, I wrote Virgin Airlines one way, $29 to the BVI, went around all the people who'd been bumped, and I filled my first plane. And that got me thinking, that airlines do bump people. They don't care about you or me, particularly in the air. And so I then rang up Boeing and said, do you have any second-hand 747s?
No kidding. It was literally that. You just sat in the airport and said, I'm starting an airline right now because I'm frustrated.
Exactly. And I think most of the best entrepreneurial ideas come out of frustration. I think, if you're frustrated about something, the best way of sorting it out is get out and do it, and you've got yourself a business.
The definition of values is they're the behaviors or principles that you religiously adhere to within your company. When I say religious, I mean that no amount of data will sway you from those principles, and the degree to which that you have the courage to maintain your conviction around those ideas is the degree to which you're going to be successful over the long term.
The most important thing when you're working with people early is that you guys line up on what your goals are. That sounds really basic, but you can totally, it can be fine. You can want to build a small business that makes money and you don't have to go to an office every day. Or you can want to build a huge company. You can want to build Google, but I think you have to be really, really aligned on that.
So the most important part of getting to a goal is to start feeling it now, is to start acting as if, right? If you want to be that leader, if you want to be that author, if you want to be that painter, all it takes is one action, and you truly are in the process of becoming it. So it's funny that I am literally basically done with the book, and I'm like, can I call myself an author yet? I've written a book. Of course, because you have taken the action, you're doing the actions. There is no final anointing of anyone. There's no ceremony, there's no fireworks. You just start acting as if and feeling it and envisioning it and picturing it. And soon enough, you become it, right? So everybody starts somewhere. So whether you are a famous ballerina or an Olympic swimmer, they all started somewhere. They all had to take that first class. They all had to take that first leap into the water, right? And at what point can you start calling yourself a swimmer, a dancer, an author? It's the second that you start taking action and you start thinking it and you're feeling it, right? It's about embodying it. So my biggest tip for you is to start seeing yourself as that person and start taking the small actions of being that person that you want to be. That's the only thing that is separating you from actually being it. So you have to act as if in order to really start getting that ball rolling, and all of a sudden you are.
When a lot of corporations have, they might call them core values or guiding principles or so on, but the problem is usually they're very lofty sounding. They kind of read like a press release the marketing department put out. They sound just like their competitors, and maybe you learn about it on day one of your job, but then it becomes this meaningless plaque on the lobby wall. Well, we wanted to come up with committable core values, and by committable, meaning we're willing to hire or fire people based on those values, completely independent of their actual job performance.
Everyone has a problem with time, but the day has 24 hours, and we sleep 6. Now, I know there's some out there that say, whoa, I need 8. Well, I say just sleep a little faster. Because the bottom line is we have 6 hours of sleep, 24 hours are available, so you have 18 hours now available to your work, your family, your hobbies, and also to learn something new or to do something new, which could easily be that you want to learn a new language, or that you want to read as a New Year's resolution, I have to read a book every week, or you say, I'm gonna go and reshape my body. So you're gonna go and take this hour out of your schedule and say, I'm gonna train an hour every day. So this is, for most people, a huge challenge, but it is totally doable, I can tell them, because the kind of things that I did when I came to this country, I mean, I went to school, I was working in construction, I was working out my 5 hours a day. I was taking acting classes from 8 o'clock at night to 12 midnight. I was doing all of those things. I wanted to make sure that out of the 24 hours of the day, that I don't waste one single hour. Those hours were too precious. And so there I just want to tell people, don't give me this thing, I have a difficult time with the time and I don't have time for this and I don't have that. You have time, you make the time.
So I kind of like have
jokingly with a lot of people say that, you know, my job is basically like to be the assistant for the rest of the company. Like, my job is to make sure that like you have what you need, that it's and basically you have everything you need to kick ass. Like, that's my job. If you don't have that, then let me know, because I'm not doing my job.
So many things go wrong when you're starting a company, and often I think people ask, you know, what mistakes should you avoid making? And you know, my answer to that question is don't even bother trying to avoid mistakes, because you're going to make tons of mistakes, right? And the important thing is actually learning quickly from whatever mistakes you make and not giving up, right? And I mean, there are things every single year of Facebook's existence that could have killed us or made it so that it just seemed like moving forward and making a lot of progress just seemed intractable. But you just kind of bounce back and you learn, and nothing is impossible. You just have to kind of keep running through the walls.
The two things we really zero in on people are, you know, two things. They sound simple, they end up being very difficult. Courage and genius. Courage is the one we talk about a lot because it's the one that people can learn. You know, courage, which is to say not giving up in the face of adversity. You know, just being absolutely determined to succeed, you know, is something that you can like force yourself to do. It can be very painful. You can force yourself to do it. The genius part is a little bit hard to force yourself to do. You know, courage without genius might not get you where you need to go, but genius without courage almost certainly won't.
If you don't love it, you won't make it through the long period of pain that is inevitable. So make sure that you take care of yourself during the process. Make sure that you take care of your mental health, your physical health while you're doing it, because it's a long road.
I think my biggest tip is just get started. I meet a lot of young entrepreneurs who have good ideas or bad ideas or some ideas, and you don't want to be a person who just talks and talks and talks. You have to actually go and do something. And don't worry about if it's the perfect thing or not. There is this myth of entrepreneurship that you'll have the one genius idea and suddenly everything falls into place. It doesn't work like that. It's a hard slog. There's a lot of things to do wrong, a lot of things you'll do right. The sooner you get started, the sooner you'll get somewhere.
You know, one of the things that I tell people when they ask me for advice about what they should do when they're wanting to start their own business or take a next step in their career is to actually start small. I think a lot of people try to, they kind of psych themselves out, or they get too overwhelmed with how big something can get. But the truth is, you really just got to start small, and you got to prove it before you scale.
Make sure you choose, you know, when you're trying to decide whether or not an idea is good enough to pursue, or a particular business is something you want to go forward with. Make sure that it's the type of business that when you're standing in the shower, it's the thing you want to think about for the next 10 or 20 years.
People really love simplicity. So if you look at the problems with large software like Microsoft Office, every feature in Microsoft Office somebody wanted at some time. But what happens is over 10 or 20 years, the thing gets so huge, it's overwhelming. So the discipline of great product design is to figure out what are the important cases for the long term, and to have the discipline to say no to some things that are good. It's easy to say no to things that are bad, but great product design is saying no to some things that are good.
You have to decide if you're going to be a slow growth company or a get big fast company, because anytime you try to straddle those two lines, painful things happen to you.
A lot of people come to me and they say, well, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I go, oh, that's great. What's your idea? And they go, well, I don't have one yet. And I say, well, I think you should go get a job as a busboy or something until you find something you're really passionate about, because it's a lot of work. And I'm convinced that about half of what separates the successful entrepreneurs from the non-successful ones is pure perseverance. It is so hard. You pour so much of your life into this thing, and there are such rough moments in time that most people give up. I don't blame them. I mean, it's really tough, and it consumes your life. I mean, if you've got a family and you're in the early days of a company, I can't imagine how one could do it. I'm sure it's been done, but it's rough. I mean, because it's pretty much an 18-hour-a-day job, 7 days a week for a while. So unless you have a lot of passion about this, you're going to not survive. You're going to give it up. So you got to have an idea or a problem or a wrong that you want to right that you're passionate about. Otherwise, you're not going to have the perseverance to stick it through. And I think that's half the battle right there. It's hard to remember how bad it was, in early 80s, with IBM taking over the world with the PC, with DOS out there. It was far worse than the Apple II. And they tried to copy the Apple II, and they'd done a pretty bad job, and you needed to know a lot. And so things were kind of slipping backwards. And Macintosh was, you saw the 1984 commercial. I hope you have that in your archives. You know, Macintosh was basically this, this relatively small company, you know, in Cupertino, California, taking on the Goliath, IBM, and saying, wait a minute, your way is wrong. This is not the way we want computers to go. This is not the legacy we want to leave. This is not what we want our kids to be learning. This is wrong, and we are going to show you the right way to do it. And here it is. It's called Macintosh, and this is so much better that it's going to beat you. And we are going to do it. And that's what Apple stood for.
So you know the most important thing you can actually advise yourself or anyone else? Ignore your mistakes. Like, what is your problem? You're good at some things, just go do that. The number one thing you should worry about is, am I doing the things that I'm good at?
Basically, the theory is we're all born thinking like entrepreneurs. You know, like when we crawl and we start and we fall, you know, when we're trying to walk, we figure it out. Entrepreneurs always figure out, you're born thinking like an entrepreneur, that, you know what, I'm going to figure this out regardless, and I'm going to keep going. Now, often the challenge is families and friends convince you not to be an entrepreneur, because when you say, I'm going to change the world, I'm going to be the most famous person, I'm going to save the seals, they say, don't do that. It didn't happen before. Yeah. It's never happened. You're gonna fail. You're gonna embarrass us.
They put the limiters on it.
They put the limiters on. Yeah. They put the blinders on you. But true entrepreneurs will just keep figuring it out.
And can't stress this enough. Choosing your partners has got to be maybe the most important decision you'll ever make. Whether personally in love or otherwise in business. You can change your idea, you can pivot your company, you can't change your partners without starting over. And so I see so many people rushing into these relationships. I mean, you should really give that a lot of thought. This is something that hopefully will last years.
I think that's what people always have to ask themselves. Do you believe in the concept of what you're doing? Do you believe that there's really a there there? If you can figure out the right, product package or the right way to reach users, and if you believe that, then, keep scrapping, because usually there's a way.
There is an advantage to being what I like to call now hardcore. Hardcore. I don't know quite how to describe it. It's a combination of tenacious and dedicated and passionate and committed, something like that. Hardcore. I learned about being hardcore from math concentrators at Harvard. I'm not going to ask whether we have any math concentrators here, but I would say that's where I got kind of my lesson. I mean, people could just go crazy, focused. And it wasn't just that people were genius, but working and working and working and working. I'd sit in my room working on a problem set, and after 3 hours, I'm a little ADD. I just couldn't take it. The most hardcore people could just power through anything. And the advantage of being that tenacious and dedicated and committed, I claim, it helped us at Microsoft. It was fundamental at Microsoft, but I learned it here at Harvard.
So it's about this movement forward, not what you own, not your education or your pedigree, not a pile of resources you might have at hand, not your network, just going after this thing and knowing that as you do that, you'll find what you need, you'll make your way over, around, and through. And I think the best entrepreneurs that I've met are able to do that because they have this strong vision and they know that it's worth it to keep moving forward.
Larger, more established entities can't move as quickly as you can. And success and scale and size all fight against this. And I would encourage you for the longest possible time as you sort of start your own companies to look for ways to stay agile.
When you start with your company, you're going to have a lot of anxiety and stress and fear, and your job is to transform that into self-confidence and to give you kind of that, the ability to say, I have clarity, I trust myself, I have a feeling for my vision, I can see that happening. I work with entrepreneurs all the time. That kind of shift from, anxiety to trust, that's the most important thing that they can go through.
What I see right now is people wrap up their sense of success and identity with their prowess in fundraising and comparing themselves against how their peers are doing. I think that's really the wrong way to look at things, and it leads to kind of non-optimal outcomes. For instance, I don't know if the valuations that companies are getting today is necessarily healthy for the company themselves. And for us, again, our inability to raise capital actually forced us to be very disciplined in how we think about the operational metrics of the company, and that's allowed us to be pretty successful.
I find that levels of success in almost any industry or area correlate to a person asking great questions. In some cases, they seem absurd. In fact, the hallmark, in a way, of great questions is they sound completely ridiculous. So someone might ask, like Peter Thiel, why can't you achieve your 10-year goals in the next 6 months? As a thought exercise, that's a good question to answer for yourself. And these types of questions come up surprisingly often with very, very impressive folks, whether it's in business, military, entertainment, or otherwise. And the way you can get better at questions is by studying interviews in part. So I studied Larry King, I studied Charlie Rose, I studied Terry Gross, I studied go down the list. I studied Tony Robbins, who does in-person, one-on-one interventions at his events in front of 10,000, 5,000 people. And he's just genius with how he uses questions to pattern interrupt and grab someone's attention and divert them in a more productive direction. Now, why is that relevant? It's relevant because thinking is the process of asking questions. You're asking yourself questions and then you're answering them in your own head. So if you get better at asking other people questions, you get better at asking yourself questions, which means you're improving your thought performance and level of thinking.
And you know what everybody wants to hear? What they already believe to be true. And so the last thing they want to hear is an original idea that contradicts their belief system. So it's very hard to even bring that kind of stuff up. But those are the things, those are the only things that you believe that everybody around you doesn't believe, when you're right, that create real value in the world. Everything else people already know. There's no value created. It's just business as usual. So it's so important to think for yourself.
Don't solicit feedback on your product, your idea, or your business just for validation purposes. Be really careful about that. You want to tell the people that can help move your idea forward, but if you're just looking to your friend, coworker, husband, wife for validation, be careful, because out of love and concern, a lot of people will express some concerns, and it can stop a lot of multi-million-dollar ideas right in their tracks in the beginning.
I would say that the lesson learned for me to anybody else out there interested in starting a business is please find something you're passionate about, because it's so much work, it's so much time, it's so much effort. But if the subject matter is something that you genuinely love to be involved with, it's not going to be that big of a drag, and it's not going to be that much work. It's going to be incredibly exciting and rewarding, because to your point, you'll feel like you're living the life that you're meant to live.
Today, you should think, okay, my co-founders, do we cover a lot of surface area? Do we have different skill sets? And is it somebody that I trust fundamentally? And those are really, really, really important questions to ask yourself, because if so, then you have a really strong foundation to go forward.
Failure is part of life. I mean, the difference for me, though, is I look at failure as a stepping stone to success. It's a speed bump. I know I'm going to fail, but it's not failure if you learn something. And so, gosh, I've made so many mistakes. I've screwed so many things up, but every time I do, it becomes a way for me to explain to someone else what it takes. You know, it's like, here's what I've done. I think I have the ability to influence people because I talk about my failures. I talk about all the things that messed me up, but I show people that I didn't let it stop me, and you don't let it stop you. And I think that's really the secret in that area.
And if everything you touch was successful, you probably wouldn't be able to relate to people as much.
No, you'll be relate, and also it's be total bullshit, and everyone knows it's bullshit. And also you'd be bored silly. Right. I mean, think about it. If you just said, I want this and happen, I want this and it happen, you know, people don't value what they don't fight for. You know, it's like you see kids sometimes, you know, your parents will say, you're not going to value this if you don't work for it. And your kid going, I'll value it, just give it to me, right? But it's true. Yeah. You know, the things we've worked the hardest for, we value the most. Yeah. So I think, you know, the purpose of a goal is not getting it anyway. The purpose of a goal, you know, is who you become. Who you become is going to make you happy or it's going to make you sad. So I'm not looking for an effortless approach. Sure. There's no such thing.
Everybody thought we were crazy. We probably were crazy, but
having a dream like that resonates with people, changing the world, achieving something big, it turns out that's what pulls you through the hard times. Every company has hard times. Every company has setbacks, and it's having that mountain in the distance that you're trying to scale, that is what gets everybody through.
And if you're really trying to achieve something, then sort of say, hey, here's my vision. And I like to say, be obstinate about your vision, but be really flexible about your tactics. What does that mean? It's sort of like think big, act small. What that means is it's important to have a vision of where you're trying to go. How you get there is a series of experiments. Now, you can call them failures when they don't work, but they're learning experiments where you try things, see what works, try the next thing.
If you're going to start your own thing, you know, maybe you have a grand vision of like all the different features it's going to have and all the different, you know, revenue lines you're going to do, and, you know, keep that vision, but do one piece of that first and do it really, really, really well. It's so much better to do a few things well than many things poorly.
So there are a number of decisions that we make every day, and on a product side, there are a billion different features that we could make. So the hard part is really choosing which ones to focus on, which ones to build, and you only have a finite number that you can't actually execute on. So for us, a lot of it is just listening to the community, and more importantly, understanding, you know, what features they're asking for, but why are they asking for these specific things? What's the root problem they're trying to solve or goal that they're trying to achieve? And a lot of that is based on actual behavior. So not just what they say, but what they do.
You went to Harvard and you dropped out. Have you ever thought how your life could be better off if you had gotten your Harvard degree?
Well, I'm a weird dropout because I take college courses all the time. I love learning company courses and things, so I loved being a student. And there were smart people around, and you know, they fed you and they gave you these nice grades that made you feel smart. So I feel it was unfortunate that I didn't get to stay there, but I don't think I missed any knowledge because, you know, whatever I needed to learn, I was still in a learning mode.
You can't ever sort of balance two completely contradictory things as a means of hedging. You have to decide what are you going to believe in and put all of your energy behind that. And those are the kinds of strategic decisions and trade-offs that you make every day as an entrepreneur. And it's important that you create the level of clarity and conviction to go after an opportunity that isn't hedging, you know, lots of different ideas or lots of different approaches, because that's the surest way that you'll never be good at sort of anything.
And I found, even with myself, that it's really hard to do a minimum viable product that's minimum, that you're constantly thinking, no, it really has to have this other part, and it really has to have this. And then you overbuild, and then you have to unbuild and debuild, which is very disappointing. So doing a minimum viable product is really important, and it's even more minimum than you think it is.
We get to create any company we want, right? We get to create the reason for its existence. We get to create the rules of the game and who we hire and how we hire them and who can stay and who can't stay, right? It's beautiful. And so I just would encourage everyone that as we all contemplate life to try to question the assumptions that we live by and the default options that are given to us, and expand our thinking to wonder what we really can do with our lives.
Be lucky. I think when I give that advice, be lucky, it's a little bit glib, but I think there's also looking out for those opportunities and being conscious and being aware and looking for opportunities to be lucky, because you can definitely put yourself in a position where luck isn't going to make any difference.
You're really trying to solve a new problem in a different way. You have to come to problems with beginner's mind, right? Not knowing something can be a very powerful tool into accomplishing it because you don't know that it's not possible. That's what doing a startup is. Not realizing that something is impossible and doing it anyway.
Building really great companies just takes a while, and it's good to not try to do it too fast. It's really, really, really good to be ambitious, obviously. But it's not that great to be too hasty.
It's not necessarily about the exit or the outcome. It's about the journey. So it's for me, it's just I think you just need to enjoy that aspect of it. It's you know, because it's not always an easy ride. It's a lot of ups and downs along the way, but as long as you're personally fulfilled by that experience and genuinely enjoy what you do, then it makes it worthwhile.
If somebody said to you, you'll have
or you'll be as successful as you are now, what would you had said back then?
I believe you. That's what I would have said. Because I did believe.
Yes.
I believed in it. I had very few people who told me that. I had a small group of people that would tell me something like that. Other than that, it was just me telling myself.
Yep.
So if someone came up to me and told me that all the way back then, I'd say, you're damn right.
But ultimately, the biggest thing, and what I still spend from a third to a majority of my time on, is hiring. Nothing has the impact of getting the right people around the table. And you can't manage your way out of a bad team.
Because if you build something for yourself, if you build something that you love, that you think is sufficiently epic, if you make something that you love, there's probably another billion people in the world that love it as well.
And so some of the best advice I got was from Paul Graham, one of the investors in Stripe, who talks a lot about unscalable strategies for user acquisition. Say, for example, you helping each user personally. Sure, that won't scale as you grow to a very large size, but when a startup is just starting out, it really helps you have an advantage as a small and nimble company.
You need to focus on solutions, not ideas. All of us here are really creative, and we come up with loads of ideas throughout the day, and we become really excited about that. And it's like, dude, we should start a company around that. But that's when you actually go to the other side, where you talk to, where you find out what someone actually a problem that they have and solve that, is when real value comes out.
I'm in meetings a lot. My calendar gets very full with those, and then at night, after the kids have gone to bed, I'm on email a great deal. I get messages during the day. That's my chance to give long responses. And then over the weekend, I send a lot of mail as well. I take 2 weeks a year to just go off and read and think, where I'm not interrupted by work or anything else. I'm just solidly trying to think about the future, and people get to send me things to read as part of that so-called Think Week. So it's a nice mix of things. About 25% of the time that I'm out traveling around, meeting with customers, Europe, Asia, and that sort of helps me think, okay, do we have the right priorities? What are people responding well to, and what would they like to see us do better?
I think, if you know why you're doing something and what it is that you're trying to get, then it's a question of being very, very open to failure, and just, trying again and again and again until you get it.
And what do leaders look like? First and foremost, leaders always have a herd. People always like following leaders. Maybe it's their charisma, maybe it's their personality, maybe it's because they're so in belief of what they say that you have the ability to convince people to buy into your vision, not just for a paycheck. It's something more than that. Because great leaders, they don't only have a herd, they fight for their herd, and the herd knows that. That's your job as entrepreneurs. These are not employees that do your bidding. These are partners that you should bring into your space. And you should be treated like that, and they should be treated like that, with respect and with dignity.
Values are who you are, right? You don't have personal values, professional values. It's really what you stand for. And again, there's no black and white answer here. There's no right or wrong value. But if you're building a team or building an organization, you want to understand your identity. And then it mostly impacts hiring. It impacts the way that you decide to add people to your team. Otherwise, you can become very, very split in terms of what your mission is.
If you're going to have a breakout startup, you've really got to think about how you're going to innovate on distribution, not just product, right? And the biggest mistake I see these days that I see brilliant startup founders who are brilliant product people, and they've really thought about their product, but they haven't really thought about how they're going to make it grow. And then they launch their product, and it's like crickets chirping. No one's using it, and they're kind of flummoxed as to what to do because they've never really spent time thinking about it. And they just kind of assume that, if you build a good product, everyone's going to find it. And the reality is, it's a big web out there, and That's not necessarily true.
The beauty of failing is if you're open to admitting the failure and learning from it, you probably won't fail again in that one department, and you'll know what to expect next time, and that just makes you stronger and more accurate with the risks that you take.
A rule of thumb is to only worry about the next order of magnitude. So when you have 100 users, worry about what the company looks like. Can it survive to 1,000? 1,000, 10,000, and so on and so forth. If you're worrying about the millionth user and their experience and how your technology is going to scale, when you have 100 users, you're pointed in the wrong direction.
But we realized it pays to be a cockroach. And by that, I mean, it pays just to not stop and just to not die. Like, we thought, everything along the way, it tried to kill us, right? Like, all of our friends were like, startups are dumb, you're dumb, your ideas are dumb. And we kind of just looked at all of them and said, whatever, and built Codecademy. So it pays not to quit.